about your stereo system? What
I
happened?
was just
Power surge.
I was just complaining that I've got a really good amplifier, which I've had for an awful long time, and we had a power cut yesterday, and then the power came back on, and since then I can't get it out of standby. It's just sitting there. So I thought, oh well, maybe I've had it so long, maybe it's about time to get a new one. So I looked up a new one, £3,500. So I thought, bugger. So I'm trying to work out what to do with it now.
Yeah, the worst bit about that is you can't even claim on insurance, because the insurance will go, well, actually no, will they do like for like?
I don't know actually, and I don't know whether it was the power surge that did it, but it's pretty.
Oh mate, it will be. It's bound to.
It will be. It's probably surge, because I don't think with my laptop stuff I've got a surge protector on it, but I don't think I've got a surge protector on that one. But anyway, why a surge protector?
How fascinating to start our unscripted session with a talk about insurance and surge protection. That's a bad day. Bad day. Anyway, mate, how's things? How are you? Other than ranting about losing very expensive speaker equipment.
It's been quite an interesting week actually. I went to an event up in London last week.
Yes, you enjoyed that, didn't you? It sounded quite good.
It was really good. It was an event organised by Realcomm and for CIOs. So there were only about 30 odd people there, but about 20 of them people I know really well, but I hardly ever get to see. So in terms of sort of ROI, it's the best conference imaginable. So it was really interesting. On the other hand, it was actually quite depressing in some of the conversations afterwards. I was talking to one chap who works for a big landlord, who was having a bit of a go at all of prop tech and was a bit too gleefully for my own liking, reckoning so many prop techs are about to meet their demise. And I gather everyone's now saying stay alive till 25, which makes me laugh, because there was a time when it was stay alive to 95, which was
that's showing your age.
He's very downer on things. And
so hang on. So break that down for me. Why?
Because the market is just stagnant and.
Okay, hang on. But which market? As in
the customer market.
Okay, so on the demand side, so on the property industry.
On the demand side, so then he reckons they're not really doing anything, and then saying there's too many ways, too much money, and a lot of technology is being superseded, and the like. But there's this strange paradox that you've got the market is very quiet and people aren't buying and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But I still come back to, I don't understand how the demand side has any choice but to seriously upgrade the technology within its buildings, whether it likes it or not.
Okay, but hang on. Go back a bit. Because I agree with you. I think you're right. I think there are drivers in the industry that mean the property industry has to innovate itself. It has to look at its processes. It has to look at its technologies. It has to look at its what's the right word? I can't come to the word, but anyway, it has to look in at itself and realize that the way it's always done things, it's not future-proofing itself. So I agree with you. Having said that, do you genuinely disagree with him, or is it a dose of realism that whilst they need it, and maybe they haven't realised that they do at the moment? Is that not the way to look at it?
I do, and I don't. I think there's one of the things I thought for a long time in prop tech is far too much of it is fintech, dressed up as prop tech, and in my mind, there's not enough prop tech actually worrying about the prop bit. What the actual technology to make real estate.
Oh, yeah, totally, absolutely.
And there's certainly various companies that have raised, in my mind, crazy amounts of money, and I don't understand how they're going to see a return on that. And I don't like that because that always distorts the market so much. It's the same thing with WeWork. When you just have endless money, you just distort the market completely. So it's clearly a tough market. But the thing I'm more concerned about is it seemed the attitude towards assets wasn't with. There's this situation where it seems to me so many assets are really in a much worse state than maybe we think, and there's going to be such a clear out of assets very quickly. I was talking to someone yesterday saying I've got a large building, but to bring it up to scratch and to make it something that customers would actually want is basically the value of the building now.
It's funny, Anthony. I'm afraid I fundamentally disagree with you, in the sense that I think. I agree with that last point, which is I think the assets are in a worse state than many people think they are. I also agree with whoever it was you were talking to that there is a reckoning next year.
Yes.
I'm afraid I do. I 100% agree with that. But I think there's an arrogance from that person in the way that it was perhaps portrayed. But I do believe that the technology sector, and I don't want to call it prop tech, but I am going to group technology companies together. I don't think it matters if it's within the built environment. I think the industry has survived on VC money for so long. There is an ego attached to getting a VC investment. There is a worth of a founder to be VC backed. I think it has survived on cheap money for a long time. I think VCs have also survived on cheap money for a long time. So I don't think it's just the tech sector that is staying alive till 25. I think it's also the money that has come into the sector has got to stay alive till 25. Because I'm hearing a lot of negativity from VCs that are struggling to raise money into their funds. And I think, again, it's the proven funds that have been around for a long time. We saw last week Pi Labs announced that they had got a 10x return in Fund 1 when that had closed. So, when you've got your Fifth Walls, your Pi Labs, maybe there's a few others out there that have got a little bit of a legacy, I think they'll be okay. But I think the newer funds that have come in on the wave of, in particular, the prop tech or the construction tech, and are sort of late to the game, I think they're going to struggle unless they've got a very genuine pivot to the key drivers of affordability, sustainability, productivity in generic industry. I think they might be all right. But I think if you're a bit of a laggard of a VC fund, I think you're going to struggle to raise capital. I think if you are authoritative in the sector that you are in, I think if you have true, what's the right word, leadership, and what I mean by that is a sort of a transparent leadership. I mean an authentic leadership that you as the co-founders of the fund, the managing partners of the fund, have been seen as being supportive of the sector and are proven to do that. I think you'll be okay. But the laggards, I don't think will, and it's the same within the tech sector. If you haven't got necessarily product market fit, if you haven't got a great high ownership of the IP within the product, I think 24 is going to be a really, really challenging year.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with them. I think it's probably needed.
Yeah, I can see that, but also I think we're probably at that stage where we actually need the big wipeout. We need
100%.
I mean, I hate to say it, I was talking to this developer yesterday, and I felt really bad saying, you're effed, but you are, and in so many of these situations, we need the complete reset of values, etc. Because if it keep trying to keep alive what was, you're not going to get to the point where if we reset. Actually, I think prop tech and I think the real estate industry for the right sort of people are in a very good stage, because there's still the thing. You have got to make your buildings sustainable at the least, and then you've got to make them places that people actually want to go to. And you are not going to do that without a lot of investment, a huge amount of which will be technological. So the the medium term, if you take 223, there's incredible demand factors for why we could get to a much better built environment. But there's a stage at the moment, and you might well be right. 24 might be the time you just clear it all out, reset to zero, and let's start again. I mean, after all, this is the real estate industry. The whole point about the real estate industry is it goes in cycles, and you know, it's creative destruction, isn't it? The cycle ends, creativity starts the next cycle, and I think that's probably exactly where we are. So I would say I agree with you. I'm very down about next year, but very, very positive over the next five years or so. If we get this reset. I mean, an investment manager said to me a few weeks, and she said, "You just got to wait until it's 30p in the pound." And you go, "What?" Oh. And she said, "Yep, that's what it's going to be, 30p in the pound, and then we'll start again."
Yeah, it's cyclical. It'll come back round, but I'm just sort of trying to work out in my head that if we're going to stay alive in 25, we've got to get used to being poor in 24 as a tech company. But no, I think in all seriousness, I don't disagree with them. I do think there's an arrogance. I do think that the industry needs to strip itself out, and that's on both sides of the market: the innovation, the tech, the transformation side. Is going to have a clear out, but then I think again on the asset side, on the property side, it's absolutely right. And I only saw that, so I mean, sort of moving that discussion on, I had a really interesting. I've had a really busy week for all the interviews that I'm doing for the book, and I couldn't help but reflect on what you've just said with the meeting I had last night with the CIO of what was Washington REIT, or Wash REIT as they call it. It's now called Elm Communities, which is now a big multifamily REIT over in Washington, obviously. And they've cleared out all of their office stuff. They got rid of it. They sold all their office assets 2021, 22. And they've only got one office left. And they've now moved massively into the residential space, into the multifamily side, because I think they saw these trends coming. So I think we're going to see that a lot, reassessment of value, and see where we get to. So, you know, it'll be an interesting year.
On the other hand, James, of course, you get to the bit, you know, who was it who said the time to invest is when there's blood in the streets?
Yeah, obviously so, yeah.
And this is going to be the case in offices. And I was reading something last week. There is a fair amount of money has been set aside looking at distressed offices, because again, there is this point that if you can buy in at a completely different price point, everything starts to make a lot of sense. And in terms of the macro trend to offices and whatever, I'm still 100% certain that it all boils down to basically less but better. People do need space, but they need less space, and they need much better space, and they need more services, blah, blah, blah. We'll pay for that in different form factors and in different places. But, you know, like life goes on, businesses go on, people have to get together, blah, blah, blah. It's this world has not gone away. And even though there's all these other alternative assets coming up now, you know, student housing and data centers and whatever, the sheer scale of the office market is such that you can't just say, "Oh well, let's all give up on offices," because it's
absolutely
enormous.
But again, you know, just being pessimistic about it doesn't mean you're not optimistic about the opportunities that are there. I mean, I had the great pleasure of being in Serbia last week for a conference, and I talked about leaders have to get used to a VUCA world, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So, as leaders in the industry, we have to be very familiar and acceptant around the concept of volatility, which we can all see right now. Our last 10 minutes of this chat have been about volatility, uncertainty. So we don't know, we have no certainty on what the returns will be. Let's take the valuation model as a classic. We have no real concrete ability to predict what returns we're going to get on the valuations that, especially in commercial, are going to get. So as leaders, we are starting to work in a very uncertain world where we know that there's going to be, let's take 30p in the pound, there's going to be a return. We just don't know what it is. So we're working in an uncertain world at the moment. We're working in a complex world. Again, let's continue that analogy around valuation. The old school theory about how you value a building is fundamentally shifting. The ways of working out that valuation is changing. It's going to become a much more complex transaction, a much more complex equations or whatever we want to talk about to understand the value that we have in our assets. So that's going to be a challenge. And then we have the ambiguity, and I talked about this with you last week, which is, with everything in uncertainty, we kind of have an understanding of a probability of what will be the returns. But with ambiguity, and this is what I talk about with artificial intelligence, that we don't know the parameters upon which we're going to be looking at where the value is. So as leaders in this world now, whether you're in residential construction, commercial, retail, or whatever, we are dealing with a VUCA society. And so the leaders of yesteryear really are probably not best suited. And I said to you earlier on, I fancy a bit of a rant at the moment about leadership. The leadership of yesteryear are perhaps not the best leaders going into a VUCA society, where we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. We have to be comfortable with understanding that nothing is written now. We have to be comfortable with understanding that we are going to be dealing with our stakeholders, our shareholders, our employees in a very uncertain, ambiguous, complex and volatile society, world, economy. And as a consequence, I think leaders now have to have totally different characteristics to perhaps some, not all, but some of the leaders that we have currently in society, not least in real estate, where a lot of leadership has been in the same company or the same industry for years and years and years and years, and has gotten comfortable with understanding the sorts of situations they're going to find themselves in with the economy and society. They've got comfortable with the way that their shareholders and stakeholders interact with leadership. And this is all about to turn on its head. And everything that I'm starting to see in all of the work that I'm doing with serious leaders and serious strategists within our industry, a lot of them are coming up short in terms of everything they're doing is very short term. They're looking very much here. They're not looking, in terms of, well, actually, how do we deal with the uncertainty? How do we deal with the ambiguity and the volatility that we've got in our marketplace today? I just have a hunch, I have a feeling that as a sector, in the traditional, more incumbent side, that we're not necessarily fit for purpose. And it worries me that we might survive and we might get through that short-term period of, let's say, 1 to 5 years with some of the things that are happening. But I think there's going to be challenges for some of the traditionally well thought of businesses in 10 to 20 years hence, where perhaps the leaders of today are not really planning for, sort of post this economic blip. And, obviously no company is too big to fail, but there are going to be some serious sort of swapping in terms of the leaders of our sector, I think.
But that's the very interesting thing about this sector, which I think makes it different to many others, in that our life cycles are much longer. If you're doing a big development, it's 10 years, easy, 7 to 10 years. I think the average major project is 7 or 8 years or something. So it's a long time. And when you've got a situation like now, where things are moving so quickly, then if one isn't actively looking at, well, what is demand going to be in 5 or 10 years? How are people going to live? How are companies going to structure themselves? Where are people going to be? Blah, 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 blah. It's very, very difficult to work out what on earth should I build where. And you need a as you say, everything is predicated on, you've got quarterly reporting, annual bonuses, etc. Whereas really the important thing is, for the larger companies, is I don't care what's going to happen this year, next year, even the one after. What's going to happen 5 to 10 years time? Because we're a long life cycle business. So we do need a lot more people who have actually vision. And vision's a sort of word that's always a bit sort of, cross your fingers in business. It sounds a bit sort of la, and that's not very professional. But we do need.
Come on, Slumbers. Look, I got told off yesterday in one of my other interviews for calling customer experience fluffy.
Well, yeah, but fluffy is good. Fluffy.
That's what I tried to say, which is actually it's an essential part of it. But
well,
I'm only being sarcastic in the sense.
I'll give you there's actually a little line that I use in my talks about health and well-being and stuff. Okay. And I say Adam Smith, father of free market economics, would have been as fluffy as you can imagine, because he would have understood the output required is a productive workforce. How do I get a productive workforce? In today's world, a productive workforce comes from being happy and healthy.
Yeah,
you've got to enable people to be happy and healthy, to enable them to just really, really lean in to the work you're trying to give them. So it makes you've got to deal with the fluffy stuff to get the hard stuff. And
yeah, but we're in an industry that has never dealt with fluffy before, and as a consequence, it's struggling.
Well. Let me just. Shall I just do my first and last call, because it fits in quite nicely?
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. I mean, Christ, this whole stream is all about Unscripted, and we've just gone off on a rant. So come on, what have you been reading?
Let me just show this. So this is just a summary page.
Hang on, what's that? Right, go on. What's this? Oh, the instant. Okay.
Yeah, it's a report 2023 State of the UK flex space market from Instant Offices, who do the best research and all this. And I'm just looking at the summary findings of this, because they fit in quite nicely with what we're talking about. So you've got a summary finding. One of the problems is rising cost of doing business. The costs are going up. Yes, we know that's a problem. Supply is set to increase, though. 58% of UK landlords expect between at least 26% of their portfolios to be flexed by 2030. There's slow demand recovery at the moment, but they are forecasting 18% growth over the next 2 years. Occupancy.
Hang on. Just say that one again, Anthony. Sorry.
Flex demand in the UK has not recovered to pre-pandemic levels, but we forecast 18% growth over the next 2 years will bring recovery on track. Okay. But if you look at number 0.7, it's occupancy. Occupancy rates remain resilient at 82% across the UK as flex clients stay put. 82% occupancy is what the traditional office market would absolutely die for. But where it starts getting interesting is you get to this supply-demand imbalance. So secondary and tertiary markets are already on the brink of a supply shortage and are prime investment opportunities. So you think of the next cycle. The amenity demand rising is interesting. Amenity-specific searches increased by 18%. Occupiers expect more from their workplace and are becoming more specific and more adds value. Their number one want out of a flex space was customer service. It's the number one thing. I think it was on number 1 and number 3 variations on customer service is what makes the difference in these spaces. And then, of course, there's a spotlight on sustainability. But I want to just wrap it up with this 0.6, which is a real indication of how markets might fundamentally change. So the impact of a shift to flex. So if there was a 10% swing from traditional occupiers to flex, that would require flexible workplace supply to grow by over 5x to match demand. So you have to ask yourself, do we reckon 10% of companies that took traditional offices are likely to move into some form of flex office? And if the answer to that is yes, then we're looking at a massive undersupply over the next few years or so.
An undersupply of current flex offerings.
Of flex offices. They did another report last year that said if 1% of...
Okay, hang on. But before you go down that line, so let me challenge you and be a little bit contentious about it, given the instance work and their obvious bias, which is they have a material interest in exactly that statistic. am I being unfair in saying that is very leveraged in their own interests?
It could well be. So
you can't say it could well be. Of course it is.
No,
I don't dispute
it definitely is. So, but it's the degree to which. So, if maybe
I think we can all agree that, let's be brutally frank about it, 10% of businesses at 100% should be looking at Flex as an offering, because they need to start thinking customer first. And everything that I was discussing through with the head of director of customer experience with the Canary Wharf Group this week exactly details that, which is we need to listen to our customers more, and customers being the people who are returning to the office, in their case, will demand the ability to have flexible offerings. So yes, of course that is the case, but I don't know. I'm very skeptical about the fact that this needs a 5 times. Was it 5 times?
5 times supply would be required to match demand. But
yeah. Oh, and by the way, we can help you with that. So I'm a little bit skeptical, although I get the.
But nevertheless, if you have a lot less people going into CBDs, they're going somewhere, and they're not all staying at home. Staying at home works for some people, but long term you need other things. So, and it's interesting if you look at what Mark Dixon's doing with Regis and IWG, they're completely indexed on suburbia, essentially.
Yeah,
completely. Really buying into that in a big way. So, but the point remains, James, is what we said. This is, if these trends are right over a 5 or 10 year period, that is a very, very material difference. It's a material difference to the geography of spaces and a material difference to the form factor of spaces. And yes, people are talking about it now, but to be honest, this has been a decade in the coming, and it brings you back to who is in the position to create the spaces that people want anymore. And again, I think that goes back to your idea about leadership. It's very easy for a landlord to say, "Oh, well, never mind, we'll do some flex, we'll stick some flex in," and you think, "Well, yeah, really, you're going to do it yourself? Are you geared up? Do you have the right attitude, etc., etc.?" So you've got this sort of clash of what made sense over the last 20, 30 years in terms of corporate mindset and leadership and operating models to something completely different, and then that's potentially a big deal.
As we're talking, I'm actually just messaging a contact of mine from Eastern Europe who heads up a lot of the IWG stuff, and it was just going crazy around all the WeWork stuff when that was all going down, because they were being approached by WeWork to basically buy or to lease out all of their spaces. And he was just like, I can't keep up. There is so much going on here that it's very difficult for me to stay abreast of everything. So it's it's really is very, very interesting. And funnily enough, I'm speaking to Gareth Lewis tomorrow as one of the interviews for the book. So Gareth Lewis, head of real estate, isn't he?
Yes, I'm not sure his specific title, but absolutely top man. And their emerging markets report, the new one came out a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I'm just working through at the moment. Actually, was there anything in there that you could? I don't know if you can remember back this far. Was there anything in there that particularly interested you?
Yes, in the sense of a lot of that is to do with the rise of alternatives, alternative types of industry, but also the move to much more operational. To actually run some of these alternative spaces, you need to become an operator, and it's different from the old school. You buy an office and you send someone a bill 4 times a year. That's all you have to do. To a world where you actually have to really be an active participant in the asset. And he was very interesting about following the money. He talks about the capital markets there and where money is being invested and what people will actually invest into. And there certainly is plenty.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what asset classes investors are happy to put money in.
Okay, that's quite interesting, because a lot of the discussions I've been having at conferences is the fact that retail is really struggling, and trying to get money in for retail at the moment from an investor's perspective is quite tricky. So yeah, I'll focus in on all of that side, but I'm quite looking forward to talking them through. But I mean, it's such a massive report. It's hard to pick out the key elements that I'm interested in. I might there's an AI for that, you're going to say, aren't you?
Yeah, but it's still interesting to look at the fundamentals of certain cities. That the more things change, the more things stay the same. London is going to change a lot. Manhattan will change a lot. Paris will change a lot. But they're still London, New York, Paris. They're fab places. And you look at the listings of cities, and they move around a bit, but it's still pretty clear, I think, in terms of where one wants to be. If you said, I want to be in 10 cities, where do I go? And yes, that also means that everyone else is going to the same place, so it's more expensive. But in many ways, I think there's going to be a big bifurcation between cities that do really well and cities that struggle. And all cities are having to adapt to this new world. Just the sheer movement of people, or the quantity and quality, and where they go is changing so much, and what they do. But there's still some cities that are always going to be places you want to go to, and others you think you could really struggle. What are you going to find that's going to attract people to your city? And I think that's an
but that's what I find really interesting in terms of the short-termism aspect of it. And let me expand on that, because there is no doubt the massive urban centres of London, New York, Paris, and so on are always going to have a material interest because of all the people there, the mixture and the clash of cultures, of innovations, of technologies, of business, of work, so forth. But I have had a long-held belief, and I'm not going to be disproven or proven in 5 years. This is going to be proven in my lifetime, that I don't think the cities of the next generation and the one after are necessarily going to be those hubs. I think that the idea of the 15-minute city is a fabulous one. I think the idea that as a population we will increasingly move towards cities is probably not wrong. But I think the idea of what a city is and what a city is not is going to shift and change. And I'm not sure the massive conurbations that we have are necessarily right for the next generation and beyond, for what the demands of that society is going to be. And I only look at the travels that I've done in the Middle East with some of the cities that are growing there. And by the way, I don't mean this in the sense of, for example, Riyadh. I don't know if the way that they're building Riyadh is necessarily a good thing. I don't think that the city planning aspect has actually had much thought applied to it. But what I do appreciate and understand is that these newer developments in sort of secondary cities and tertiary cities, I think, are more interesting because they've got more flexibility. There's in the infrastructure that is needed.
Let me just quickly show this. There's an article in Harvard Business Review last week called. Have you got that there, James? Can you just?
Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
It's called the Rise of the Meta City. And it says New York and Miami, Dubai and Cairo, the Bay Area and Austin, pandemic-era migrations have created strong new connections between cities, and companies need to update their location strategy to keep up. I think this is it's worth reading. I think it's overblown. It's trying to say
When was that?
This city has a natural satellite, but to be honest, they've sort of always had it looks at flows of people between, as I say, like it says, between.
When was that written, Anthony?
Last week.
Oh, it was okay. Oh, yeah, I'd like to read that.
It's literally just come up, but it is an interesting thing that you're definitely going to get changes in behavior when we settle down to coming together a couple of times a week or a couple of times a fortnight.
Yeah.
The chances are more and more people are going to move to somewhere else and then come in for a couple of days. And that behavior is not unlikely to change. So it's interesting, they're mapping the connection between, for instance, how many people live in Lisbon but actually work in London. But they actually work on the internet, but then when they meet up, they meet up in London. So yeah, there's definitely going to be lots of changes on that front. But interestingly, you see, I think this is a very big positive for Europe, because Europe's awash with lovely secondary and tertiary cities. It really is. You know, there's an awful lot of places where you think that would be a really nice place to live, and you couldn't live under the old world of 5 days a week in the office, and you can start to live in different places. But
let me expand on that a little bit, in the sense of why I think the secondary and tertiary cities and beyond are going to be more prevalent than I think we're necessarily thinking about, because you've only got to look at the patterns of the age group and the decade sort of underneath me, I was probably the last age group who were fortunate enough to be able to, you know, with or without the help of mum and dad, buy a property in my 20s, and it then became in the 30s, and so on and so forth. And the transient nature of sort of, you know, the millennial generation and generation Z, I think is going to be more predominant around the world of flexible work, and the fact that they have given up, not entirely, but they've almost given up the hope of home ownership in the traditional sense of what a home ownership is. And as a consequence, I genuinely believe that generation beneath me and then keeping on going is going to be a naturally transient, digital first generation that is not wanting to be confined and defined by the work that they do in a particular place. And also, and this is not discussed often, where they reside. They don't have to be tied down to the fact, you know, I've been living 3 fields from here for nearly 2 decades now, and I'm comfortable with that, and I like that, and I like the certainty, and I like where I live. But I'm not sure my children will necessarily have that same wish to be defined by the place that they live, and there will be much more transient around all of that. So that's why I think that
I think this is a really, really enormous point, James, because clearly, you know, we were talking about incentives the other day, and clearly that change completely changed the incentives for people. So for my generation, all my friends bought their first place when they were 25 or so. And we all moaned. The joke was we all moaned about how ridiculously expensive everything was. Even then. So it's not that it felt cheap then, but obviously in retrospect, it was extremely cheap. So the incentive for my generation, and probably the same for your generation, frankly, is to pile your money into your asset, into your property.
Yeah.
When that incentive is just not there at all, you're clearly going to develop completely different behaviors.
Yeah. Because
you're not incentivized to behave in a certain way. So you're going to be led by other incentives. So yeah, I think we probably underestimate the potential impact on that. What it might do, of course, is it actually might feed into the entrepreneurialism of younger people. That if you're going to put your money into something, start a business. Because, you know, if I can put my money into it and I'm going to make money out of my property, then fine. That's what I'll do.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you've got a lot more incentive to start a business. But that's also going to come be the changing nature of corporates as well. You know, more and more corporates, a higher and higher percentage are contingent workers of some description, rather than being on the books, and that changes behaviour as well. And I think we probably don't make we don't pay enough attention to how the incentives are changing and what therefore might be the behaviours. I mean, it's again difficult because there's still things like the agglomeration impact that, you know, if you're young and bright, where are the most young and bright people? I'm not saying the only ones, but where are the most young and bright people, and where are the most interesting companies? They're in the big metropolises. That's why you go there. But on the other hand, that's becoming less and less a point anyway. I mean, it's interesting just looking at my own situation. I pretty much don't have any clients in the UK anymore, but you know, I'm perfectly busy. But all my clients are overseas nowadays, and that's not a problem. But it's a very different behaviour, and that's just sort of morphed into being that. So.
But this comes back to my original semi-rant, definitely by no means a Slumbers rant, because that goes off the scale, about the challenges the industry faces at the moment, because I don't think we look far enough in advance. So if I was in the residential side, you know, particularly in the development world, I need to understand the fact that home ownership, as it is traditionally viewed, is going to change. We are moving away from the fact that the home is the castle. You want to own it. You have that stability. You have that asset, and you know you will pay off a mortgage. And the fact that the bank is the thing that always pays it. I think we are going to be in the next 50 plus years moving to a much more transient form of ownership, where nobody feels they necessarily have the ability to own, nor want to own something that they're going to live in. And it's the same with work, which is they don't have loyalty, ownership to a brand, a boss, a company, that they have that flexibility. Of course, it's not going to be everybody, but we are going to move away from the binary 100% want that to something which is a lot more nuanced and different. And it's also going to be very different in terms of the different countries of the world and the different regions that we have. It's all going to be balanced very, very, very differently. And I think it's going to be an interesting challenge, which is why I put a post out 2 weeks ago where I asked about if you were to build an innovation team, and you could flip out the word innovation and put in a management team, you know, who would you build into that innovation team? And nobody, in fact, I'm wrong. One person said they would have a philosopher within their innovation team, because these are big societal shifts. Nobody is looking far enough in the future to really test the current business model to see if it's going to be future-proofed in 20 plus years time, which is where I feel as leaders of our industry, we need to be thinking about these big challenges and starting to understand that generation coming through as to, you know, what are they potentially going to be thinking about from a work, from a retail, from a residential perspective. And only then are we able as leaders to start thinking about not just, you know, the business that we have now, but the business that, you know, I'm going to leave to the next person who's going to come in as a CEO or an executive within that business. And
isn't there also the point though, James, that how does one create a business that the types of people you want to attract are attracted to? Specifically on the basis of people are more peripatetic, they move around a lot more, they have a lot less commitment at a macro level to where they work. How does one create a business where your employees really want to be there and have
so hang on, so let me go one step into that. The first thing you have to be as a leader is open. and have an open mindset to the fact that not everybody is going to believe in the way that you believe that things will manifest themselves. That's the first thing, just being open. The second thing is, as a leader, for me, you have to be incredibly open to knowledge which is not necessarily within your remit at the moment. I think you have to look outside of your industry, of your skill set. You have to get in the mindset of very, very different, diverse, both age, demographic, geographic, political, societal, so that you as a leader are going to be better informed about the different views that society has now. Because certainly if you're not even open to any of that, you cannot even for one instant start thinking about your business outside of the next 5 years. And for me, that the worst mistake any leader at the moment can start to think about is, my time frame is 5 years in and I'm out. What you as a leader have to do is to really consider the short term. I'm going to maximize what our business is doing now. But as a leader, you have to think beyond your tenure and say, well, I am going far. I need to prepare this business and all of the employees and all of the customers beyond my tenure. And I have to look at where it's going to be after I've left. And the best thing I can do is start with having a total and utterly open door policy to knowledge, to people. And that will start the journey of you as a leader being able to be best prepared to start strategizing about business in 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
What's your opinion about B Corps? So just to put my cards on the table, I'm a huge fan of B Corps in the sense of you have to be a company with purpose and commitment and a desire to do well by being good, and not in a goody way, but genuinely to become a B Corp is quite hard, and I think it actually says a huge amount about you as a company if you become a B Corp, and that in itself, I think, is likely to attract a lot of the type of people that actually you do want to attract. It might maybe that's a sort of hard version, but you think, how many companies out there does one think, God, I'd really love to work for them, and what is it that generates that attraction? It might be, I'd love to work for Steve Jobs. He might have been the right sod, but he's still Steve Jobs. I don't want to work for Elon Musk because he might be amazing, but he's an absolute whatever, etc., etc. So, but that only works when you're in a company with a leader that has a very high profile, and most leaders are transient. Most leaders of FTSE 100 companies come and go. So do we need more purpose-driven, stake in the ground, all for one for all? I mean, that's what you get with startups, and that's why lots of people.
Yeah, that's why there's probably a slight bias to my answer, because B Corp or not, that my skeptical attitude suggests that it's very easy for you to put it. And funnily enough, I was only looking at a company just yesterday doing some deep dive research into some of the tech that they had, and they were very proud to be in that crew. And the skeptical element of me says it's good to have. It's a tick box exercise.
It's much harder than that, though.
I know, but it's still a PRable exercise. But
yeah, okay.
But let me now be rational, which is, for all of the things that you have to achieve to be in that group, it speaks to all of the things that I think some of the leadership lacks, which is creating a vision, a purpose, values, and is able to bring an entire organization around everything, and it encapsulates what you're doing as a sector. And everything I've just talked about, which is preparing leadership for not just your tenure but afterwards, I think it does all of that. So pushing skepticism aside, 100% you want to be doing that rather than not doing that. because it shows that you as a leadership team are united around that common element. So yeah.
Should we believe in the mantra about younger people want to work for companies with purpose?
100% yes.
Do you think it's actually true?
Yeah.
Given that young people seem to move jobs every year or so, and the average for moving.
Why do they move?
Well, true. It might be.
And why is it any different to previous? And I don't mean, so in my generation, if you weren't moving every 2 years, it was a little bit weird. So is it massively different to that?
Yeah, no, maybe not. And also you could argue that if you're in the wrong place, move. Keep moving until you find your right place. And when you're in your right place, don't move.
But I do think in the Christ, I was going to use a really bad term then, but in the very short term thinking that I think perhaps the younger generation have as they're coming through, they're much more transient in attitude, as I've already talked about. I think an element of that is not necessarily understanding their own purpose, let alone what the leaders and the business that they're working for and what that purpose is. So if you're making it easy for them, and let's not be unclear here. When you're in your teenage years and your young 20s, you have a very idealistic notion of what you feel society is like and life is like. And if there is an aspect of the organization that you are about to work for where the leadership is very authentic, the vision of the company is aligned with your idealistic notion of what life should be like, and it speaks to you and what you're trying to do and achieve, then 100% yes, I think it's right. I'm just not sure it's massively different to 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's just we weren't talking in that manner.
Yeah.
I just think now we are trying to align everything with it.
Yeah, I also think the challenges are bigger now. So certainly if you're young, the financial situation is completely different for younger people now. It's much harder for them. They got a lot more debt. They got all the problems that my generation and below has imposed on them. The boom is back.
Can I just be contentious and absolutely argue me down if you don't agree with this? They're laboured with debt. They are when they if they go to university and come out of university with a lot of debt. But bearing in mind that a lot of them are not owning property, which means they're not in mortgage debt, there is an argument that actually the debt is shifting.
Yeah, but they're worse off mostly because they're having to pay rent, and rent's gone crazy.
But they might feel as if that. I mean, yeah, we go down a rabbit.
But I think just generally, if you were starting your life in your 20s now, I think the challenges over the next 20 years are actually bigger than the challenges I had starting when I was in my 20s.
I'm not sure I can say that unless.
Well, if you just think of the climate change thing.
Yeah.
If one believes in the science and looks at the actuality of what's being done at the moment, we're not heading in a very good direction, and there's a nasty brick wall not that far away.
Yeah.
And we are very reliant, frankly, at the moment, that someone's going to come out with wonder technology in a few years' time and just solve all our problems. So
certainly, I can't argue that on a climate side, but on a financial side, I think it is a bit tricky because I would, and this is a bit of a weird thing to say, but I'll try and qualify it correctly so I don't annoy people. But I would say that it's a very difficult question to answer because I'm not sure, not being in my 20s anymore, what is valuable to being in your 20s. Is it accepted that you're going to be in debt? Is there a level of acceptance that happens? I know certainly when I came out of university, you knew you'd come out with a level of debt. So is it that they value the the financial status that they have, or is it that they value the transience that they have as more? What's more important? I don't know.
It's also, one has to be very careful here, because it depends how lucky one has been by birth.
Oh, 100%, yes.
And Larry Fink, the boss of BlackRock, a few years ago, in his annual report, wrote a line saying we're about to witness the largest transfer of wealth in history, from the boomers to the millennials. Well, obviously, there are going to be an awful lot of people who actually are going to see the benefits of their parents and grandparents' real estate assets, etc., which actually then gets you onto the problem of more inequality and what have you. If you're
it really does. But I think it speaks to. So I suppose I started with the book. I'm going to end with the book, which is there are some huge drivers of change within our sector, of which innovation is at the root of most of this change, although it's not the change itself. Sustainability is definitely one. I was told by James Pellett of GPE recently that I'd missed out productivity, and productivity is absolutely a key driver, which is absolutely right. I was told by a gentleman called Simon Lee out of Hong Kong, who's part of a government initiative out there, that actually, from what they see, that safety is one of the key drivers of change within the sector, especially within construction, which is absolutely right, and I hadn't considered it. But the fourth one of the key drivers of change and shifts is affordability. And it doesn't matter if it's the affordability of somebody who's very fortunate to come out with a bank of mum and dad, or somebody who hasn't had that privilege in Western democracies, or whether it's somebody in an underdeveloped economy that hasn't got the same opportunities that others have. Affordability is an issue that speaks to every single one, and there are hopefully innovations and solutions that can support the change in that area. But it's a very divisive and very difficult challenge that the industry has, for sure, and society more broadly.
What are the? I'm just thinking about characteristics, and maybe this is a little bit romantic, but slightly stoic on my part. I'm a great believer in people should have fun, but I'm also a great believer in people actually serious and curious. And I think the need to be serious and curious today is stronger than ever. I'm not saying don't have fun, have all the fun in the world, but have it tempered by definitely curiosity. I'm always why I love, and you probably have the same thing, traveling around and speaking at all these places. We meet an awful lot of curious people. We meet an awful lot of interesting people who almost by implication are always curious. But you need to be curious now, because the world around you is morphing so much. But you also need to be serious. Some of this stuff, a lot of this stuff is genuinely serious. You need to really lean into things, understand things, think a lot. And I couldn't think of better advice to anyone young than, have fun, be curious forever, and be serious as well. Be serious when you need to be serious. Have fun when you need to have fun. And then, and good things will happen. And I'm still, to be honest, I'm still of the opinion that the greatest thing about all this new technology is it's putting incredible knowledge, trillions of dollars worth of knowledge, in the hands of everyone. And if the more people you have who are well educated, the happier I am that the world will sort things out.
Amen, Anthony, amen. And that seems to be a very just point for us to finish on this week. Stay happy, stay curious. It seems a really beautiful end. Let me end the stream. Andrew, I hope that's the link that you wanted from Anthony. Anthony, you're going to have to go and change and edit your post, because it does come up with the lovely Susan Jerrick, who I interviewed yesterday. So that's one to update. But I'm going to end the stream now, and good to speak to you. And I'm